Americans for Fair Taxation presents the Weekly Chairman's Report, written by Steve Hayes, President of Americans for Fair Taxation, and recorded by Bob Paxton, a volunteer with the Florida FAIRtax Educational Association. And now, this week's Chairman's Report.
Hello, I'm Bob Paxton with the AFFT Chairman's Report for Friday, February 21st, 2020. Just how much do you actually pay under the income payroll tax system? The truth is, no one really knows. And even with the most sophisticated computer, it is very unlikely that anyone can calculate exactly how much the income payroll tax system costs them. Now, most people will disagree with that and say, well, of course I know how much I pay in federal income and payroll taxes. It's right there on my W-2, or I just look at my tax return. Well, that's exactly what the ruling class wants you to think, but the sad fact is that your W-2 and your federal income tax return only reveal part of what you pay under the income payroll tax system. The true measure of a tax system is how much does that system reduce your spendable income. Now, here's some basic facts that almost everyone can agree on. All income you earn is going to be used for either present or future consumption. And spendable income is reduced by both your tax liability and by any expenses a tax system passes along to you. If you accept these points, then the true measure of any tax system is how much of your total earnings do you have remaining for consumption after you have deducted your tax liability and any system-related expenses. So, just what are some of the expenses attributable to a tax system? Well, first, some basic facts about businesses. First, a business has to bring in more in income than it pays out in operating expenses, or it can't stay in business. A business's expenses include the amount of federal income payroll tax it pays, plus any amounts paid to accountants and tax attorneys who make sure that the business is in full compliance with the tax laws. Now, although often forgotten, these expenses also include any costs of the tax system that are embedded in the prices of goods and services purchased from other companies. For example, if a company purchases tires for its vehicles, one factor in the price of those tires is the tax liability and compliance costs imposed on both the tire manufacturer and on the vendor that sells them. The amount added to the price of the tires in order to cover those costs represents a cost of the tax system to the company buying the tires. Competitive forces in a free marketplace can make it difficult for a company with high expenses to set prices high enough to cover those expenses. Now, in those cases, companies must find ways to reduce expenses in order to stay in business. This generally means that businesses in this situation will look to reduce labor costs or reduce the amount of money distributed to the business's owners. Now, unlike the federal government, a business can't print money, and if it borrows more than it can pay back, it will eventually be forced out of business by its creditors. Now, let's look at a company that harvests timber which it sells to a lumber mill. The company has $100,000 in expenses for things like office rent, materials, telephone service, vehicle expenses, insurance, internet, and related items. The business has 5 non-owner employees who are paid a total of $300,000 in salaries. There are 2 owners who each receive $75,000 in salary for a total of $150,000. The 2 owners want to receive an additional $25,000 of profit distributions for a total of $50,000. And finally, the owners want to put $25,000 a year into a reserve fund for future investments and as a cushion against unexpected expenses. Now, this will remain in the business as working capital, but will not be an income tax deduction for the company. The effective federal income tax rate for the company is 20%, meaning that for every dollar of profit, the business will pay 20 cents. The total of all these expenses, not including the income tax, is $625,000. Now, in addition, the company must pay the matching 7.65% of the $450,000 in wages as the employer's share of payroll taxes. That's another $34,425. Now, since this item is a tax deduction for the company will only pay $27,540 of actual costs. The balance will be federal income tax savings. This brings the new expense total to $652,540. Now, there's one additional cost to the income payroll tax system that has to be added. Because the reserve fund is not an income tax deduction, the actual cost of that item is not $25,000, but $31,250. That's how much the company has to earn in order to net $25,000 after paying federal income tax of $6,250. This brings total expenses up to $658,790. So the company has to make not $625,540, but $658,790. That's an additional $33,250, or an additional 5.3%, just to cover its expenses. Now, of course, in a perfect world, the company would increase the price of the timber it sells to cover all of the direct and indirect costs added by the federal income payroll tax system. This is why many economists believe that the actual cost of the income payroll tax system that's added to the retail prices of the products and services we buy is between 10 and 15%. Now let's look at the effect of the income payroll tax system versus the FAIRtax as applied to a family of four that earns $60,000 in wages and spends all $60,000 on new goods and retail services. First, the federal income payroll tax. A family of four earning $60,000 will owe no federal income tax. However, 7.65% of that $60,000, or $4,590 in payroll taxes, will be deducted from their gross earnings. So, subtract that $4,590 from the $60,000, and the family has a net available to spend of $55,410. Now, the FAIRtax. If the family spends all $60,000 on new goods and retail services, the net available for the family to spend will be calculated as follows. First, you have to calculate the effect of the FAIRtax prebate. Now, a family of four would have a family consumption allowance of $34,400. That means that $34,400 of their $60,000 in spending would not be taxed. So, subtract that $34,400 from $60,000, and you see the family will pay the FAIRtax on $25,600 of their spending. Multiply that $25,600 by the FAIRtax rate of 23%, and the family will pay $5,888 in FAIRtax. Subtract that from their total earnings of $60,000, and that leaves the family a net of $54,112 to spend. Now, so far, it appears that the family would have $1,298 more to spend under the present income payroll tax system than under the FAIRtax. But that is not the case. Here's the rest of the story. As illustrated above, the income payroll tax system increases the prices of the products and services we buy by a minimum of 5%, and it's more likely at least 10%. Therefore, because of the federal income payroll tax, the family paid between $3,000 and $6,000 in additional costs directly attributable to the income payroll tax. This additional $3,000 to $6,000 directly reduces the amount left for the family to spend from $55,410 to between $49,410 and $52,410, making the family better off under the FAIRtax. Remember, the FAIRtax eliminates federal payroll and income taxes, so these additional costs will no longer be added to the prices of the things we buy under the FAIRtax. If the income payroll tax system adds 5 to 10% to the price of everything we buy, it follows that eliminating that system would allow the providers to charge 5 to 10% less and still make the same profit. Now, if you think that the providers will get greedy and not pass on the full amount of their savings realized by the elimination of the income payroll tax system, let's assume, just for the sake of this example, that they'll only pass on 50% of their savings. In that case, Instead of having $54,112 to spend under the fair tax, our family of four will effectively have between 2.5% and 7.5% more to spend because their spendable income will purchase more. This means that the family will effectively have between $55,474 and $58,170, dramatically more than under the present income payroll tax system. Of course, our example assumes that all of their spending is on new goods. If, as is more likely the case, a portion of their spending is on used goods, then they will pay even less fair tax and will have correspondingly more to spend. In conclusion, while it's crazy to think that we have a tax system under which no one knows what that system really costs them, it's there because the ruling class and its minions profit from it. And that's the only reason. So, how do they get away with it? In the song Aryan Mist, singer-songwriter Van Morrison sang, "The fog of illusion, the fog of confusion is hanging all over the world." Well, although Mr. Morrison was not talking specifically about the income payroll tax, the reason that the ruling class and their minions in Congress have been able to keep the corrupt and destructive income payroll tax system in place is because we the people haven't been able to see the truth through their fog of confusion. Why would anyone accept a system that reduces the amount of money they can spend on their families? Why would anyone who understands these facts not demand a system that is better for their families? It's time to lift the fog of illusion and the fog of confusion that has allowed the income payroll tax system to remain in place and has allowed the ruling class and its minions to continue profiting at our expense. It's time to take back control of our income and our lives and demand a sane tax system to fund the U.S. government. Now, the fair tax raises revenue for the government in the simplest and most transparent manner possible. It provides the prebate tax credit to all legal households based on household size and actually allows lower and middle income families to have significantly more money to spend than they have now. The fair tax allows American businesses to be more competitive in the world market and for U.S. prices to be reduced by at least 10%. It greatly reduces the ability of Congress and lobbyists to extort money by selling tax benefits. And it makes it much harder to single out certain groups and threaten to raise their taxes if they don't behave. With the fair tax, there is only one rate, and any increase would apply to everyone. The fair tax will grow the economy at a rapid rate, will create and protect American jobs and workers, and the fair tax ensures the sustainability of Social Security and Medicare and takes away the ruling class's ability to control seniors. It's time that we demand that Congress pass the fair tax, the only truly fair tax.
This has been the Weekly Chairman's Report, written by Steve Hayes, President of Americans for Fair Taxation. Check back every week for news and information about the fair tax and learn why the fair tax should replace our antiquated federal income tax system. If you'd like to receive a copy of the Chairman's Report in your inbox every week, sign up at FAIRtax.org.